Henry Ford, one of the most influential American industrialists. Through his company, Henry transformed American life, and in this video we're gonna learn how he did it starting from the very beginning. Welcome to Boss Cube. Today in this video we'll delve into the story of Ford. You can also check out Real Engineering's video on the manufacturing innovations of the assembly line, which he explains masterfully on his channel. By all accounts, Henry Ford should have been a farmer. Born in Michigan barely 20 years after it had become a state, Henry grew up at a time when farming was slow, exhausting and manual, which is why unsurprisingly he came to hate it with a passion. But whereas most people at the time didn't have the fortune to escape what they were born into, Henry was lucky enough to get such an opportunity. You see, the village he was born in was just 8 miles west of Detroit, which was rapidly becoming an industrial center thanks to the steam engine. Early on in his childhood, Henry encountered technology which few children his age could play around with. He'd tinker with the watches of his better-off neighbors, and by the time he was 12, he could not just take them apart, but could also put them back together and repair them. His interest grew into an obsession when he got to observe a working steam engine firsthand while on a school trip to one of the rail companies in Detroit. By the time Henry had become a teenager, the steam engine was already making its way into the farming community. Coal-powered threshing machines and sawmills were becoming a common sight, and Henry was learning how they worked and how to fix them. At the age of 16, he made a huge leap forward when, against his father's wishes, he left his village to go work in Detroit, where any young mechanic could easily find a lucrative employment. Industry in Detroit was booming, and it had been doing so for close to 5 decades. In 1825, a canal had been dug connecting the Hudson River to the Great Lakes, which at the time were effectively the western frontier. All the untapped resources that had no way of getting out could suddenly be moved by steamboat to New York, and in just 50 years, Detroit's population increased by a factor of 10, with vast mines in the north producing copper and iron and lumber mills opening up virtually everywhere. All this metal and wood sustained close to 1,000 companies in Detroit alone, including the ones in which Henry would work throughout the 1880s. It's during this time that Henry by chance learned about the gas engine from the British magazine. It was being produced in small numbers by a German engineer, Nikolaus Otto, and it was gaining some traction in Europe, but it was practically unheard of in America. Henry would get the chance to work on such an engine himself in 1889, and he instantly recognized the advantages it had. Because it did not use any steam, the engine was much lighter. It got rid of the heavy boiler and all the water in it because it did all the combustion internally, a much more efficient process. This also allowed the gas engine to start quickly, whereas steam engines at the time needed as much as 30 minutes to heat the water and generate enough steam to start working. The gas engine was an innovation Henry fell in love with, but it was one he didn't fully understand. After all, he had extensive experience with steel and metal, but almost none with electricity, and the gas engine was fired by an electric spark. To obtain this missing knowledge, Henry went to work for the local branch of the Edison Illuminating Company. It was generating electricity for over 1,000 homes in Detroit, and it was doing so by using steam engines, so Henry was a natural hire for them. Whenever the engines broke, Henry had to fix them, but whenever they were working, he was free to do as he wished. It was the perfect job that allowed him to spend his days experimenting with gas engines. In 1893, when Henry had already been promoted to chief engineer at Edison, he created his first working gas engine. The idea of using the gas engine to create a horseless carriage had been around in Henry's mind since he first laid eyes on one, but making that idea a reality would take years of work. Building a car in a world with no car parts wasn't easy, and Henry had to figure out every detail through trial and error. It took him 3 years of constant effort to produce this. The quadricycle, a simple frame with an engine powered by ethanol and 4 bicycle wheels mounted onto it. It had only 2 gears, and neither one was for going in reverse, but what's worse is that it had no cooling system to speak of, thus making overheating a constant issue. In its first year, Henry made numerous improvements to the quadricycle, most notably adding a cooling system, and by the time he sold it in 1897 for $200, he had driven 1,000 miles in it. Henry built a second quadricycle and then a third one, always improving the design, before finally feeling confident enough in 1899 to start his own company. Capitalized at $150,000, the Detroit Automobile Company was a very ambitious venture. Many of the Detroit elite invested in it, including Henry's friends from the Edison Company, and everyone was eager to see what Henry could create with proper capital. Henry's plan was very clear. Since he knew many of the industrialists in Detroit by that point, he tried to build an automobile that they could use in their business. He leased a factory and planned to hire 100 workers to make his new delivery wagon, as he called it. But it turned out that building such complex machines in high numbers was much more difficult than Henry imagined. The vast majority of the parts used in the making of the delivery wagon were produced by other companies, and every time a single delivery was late, the entire factory would have no choice but to stop working. If you found this video informative, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment sharing your thoughts and insights. And if you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for more engaging content like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the following video.